Aidan Rourke never expected his covert mission in Montana's frozen wilderness to become the night that changed his life. In the middle of a blinding blizzard, 4 tiny German shepherd puppies emerged from the white silence, soaked, shaking, pressed together for warmth. At first he thought they were abandoned, but when all 4 froze, turned toward the dark forest and whimpered in fear, Aidan knew something was terribly wrong. What they led him to, hidden beneath snow and broken trees, pulled him into a desperate race against time. A wounded ranger, a cruel poacher, and a choice that forced him to step off his mission and into something far more human. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from. And if stories of courage, loyalty, and second chances move you, subscribe so you never miss the next one. Winter had settled brutally over Silver Crest National Park, a vast stretch of Montana wilderness where the wind howled like an old spirit wandering between the pines. Snow spiraled through the air, thick and blinding, swallowing the trails and muffling every sound beneath a heavy, icy silence. The nearby town of Silver Crest Valley, usually lively with wood smoke and porch lights, felt a world away from this white wilderness. Out here in the storm's grip, nothing survived without a fight. Aidan Rourke tightened the black tactical scarf around his neck and pushed forward through the drift. At 27, Aidan carried the quiet ferocity of a man trained to disappear. His frame was lean, built from long nights of endurance training. His jaw was angular, shadowed by stubble, and his eyes, a cold gray that usually revealed nothing, now narrowed against the slicing snow. He moved with the disciplined silence of a Navy SEAL on assignment, each footfall controlled despite the storm raging around him. He wasn't here for wildlife patrol. His mission was darker than that, to verify intel about a clandestine weapons route rumored to snake through this forest before slipping across the Canadian border. A track this isolated would be perfect for smugglers, and perfect for him to follow without being seen. The storm, however, was not in the mission plan. The snowfall thickened, burying the landscape under a shifting white ocean. Even the compass strapped to his vest seemed to tremble with the wind's fury. Aidan paused briefly behind a fallen pine, checking the encrypted GPS clipped to his glove. It flickered. The connection pulsed weakly, then steadied. "Good enough," he murmured. He moved again, step after step, until a faint sound pierced the blizzard. A tiny cry, high-pitched, fragile, almost swallowed by the storm. Aidan froze. Another cry followed, just a breath louder, trembling through the wind. It wasn't mechanical, not human. Something small, frightened, and very much alive. Aidan's instincts sharpened. His hand drifted toward the holster at his hip, just in case, but he moved toward the sound with caution. Snow stung his face as he climbed over a ridge of drifted powder, boots sinking several inches with each step. Then he saw them. 4 tiny shapes huddled together at the base of a half-buried spruce. German shepherd puppies, no more than 6 or 7 weeks old. Their fur, black, tan, and dusted with ice, clung damp against their tiny ribs. They shivered violently, pushing into one another to steal whatever warmth they could find. One yelped when the wind gusted over them, a pitiful, broken sound that tightened something deep inside Aidan's chest. He lowered himself into the snow, moving slowly so he wouldn't startle them. Easy, easy, little ones. But instead of fear, he saw desperation. 4 pairs of dark, round eyes stared up at him, pleading, hopeful, terrified. And then Aidan noticed something else. All 4 pups kept glancing over their shoulders, toward the dense stretch of forest behind them. They whimpered quietly each time, ears twitching, paws shifting nervously, like they were waiting, or calling, or begging him to follow. Aiden scanned the area. No tracks besides the tiny paw prints half filled with blowing snow. No adult dog. No signs of recent human presence. But pups this young didn't roam alone, and the panic in their whines told him clearly. Something had happened to their mother. Damn, Aiden whispered under his breath. The storm punished him with another blast of wind. He could leave them and continue the mission he had promised to complete, or he could pick them up, take them with him, and risk exposing himself to the smugglers he was tailing. His jaw tightened. He shrugged off his pack, unzipped a thermal liner, and tucked each trembling pup gently inside the warmth of his coat. Their tiny bodies pressed against his chest and stomach, seeking heat immediately. One let out a soft, relieved sigh. Aiden felt it like a spark in his frozen ribs. "You're not abandoned," he murmured, "which means your mother isn't far." He rose to his feet, scanning the forest once more. Something inside him, the part that had survived Kandahar and coastlines drenched in fire, knew this wasn't random. These puppies didn't just wander out into a blizzard. They were running from something, or toward something, and the direction they kept glancing at tugged at him like a thread, a dangerous thread. But he followed it anyway. "Show me," he said softly. "I'm right here." The pups shifted inside his jacket, as if understanding. Aiden adjusted his rifle, tightened his grip on his pack, and stepped deeper into the blizzard, veering off the mission path he had sworn not to abandon. Meanwhile, several miles away, Jonas Hale wiped his knife against his coat sleeve, clearing the blood of a rabbit he'd just gutted. At 42, Jonas had the hard, wiry build of a man who spent more time in the wilderness than in civilization. His face was weather-lined, his hair peppered with gray, and his narrow eyes held a cunning that bordered on feral. His coat, patched, oil-stained, and reeking of smoke, hung heavily on his shoulders. Crates of illegally trapped animals stood behind him, trembling and whimpering. Some were foxes, others were rare mountain martens. One crate held something far more valuable, a German shepherd mother, panting and bleeding from where she'd fought his snare. Jonas spat into the snow. "Should have stopped struggling, girl," he muttered. He slammed the crate shut and tossed another metal trap over his shoulder. Tonight, he needed to set twice as many. Buyers were waiting, and he didn't intend to disappoint. Unbeknownst to him, 4 of her puppies had slipped through one of his imperfect snares earlier, small enough to squeeze out. He cursed when he realized the missing count, but shrugged it off. "No matter," he grumbled. "The mother's worth more than the whole litter." With mechanical efficiency, Jonas began scattering his traps across the forest floor. Thin wires, pressure plates, jawed steel mechanisms, turning the forest into a hidden minefield. He didn't know Aiden Rourke existed. He didn't know someone was walking straight toward the center of his web. He didn't know that those 4 tiny puppies had just changed the trajectory of both their lives. Snow pressed down on the forest with a weight that felt ancient, settling into every crack of bark and hollow of earth. Aiden moved through it with steady purpose, guided by the soft, insistent noises inside his coat. The 4 pups shifted and whimpered against his chest, nudging him to follow the faint trail of paw prints barely visible under the storm's relentless drift. The forest grew darker as he descended toward a ravine lined with towering pines bent under the storm's burden. A sudden break in the pattern of trees caught his eye. One massive pine had snapped halfway up its trunk, splitting under the heavy ice. Its upper half had fallen sideways, crushing the undergrowth beneath it. The snow was disturbed there, not the natural scatter of wind, but the chaotic, urgent marks of someone struggling. Aiden scanned the scene with sharpened attention. The pups stirred violently, squirming to get free as if they sensed something familiar. He dropped to one knee, set them gently in the snow, and watched as they ran toward the fallen tree, barking high and frantic. Aiden followed, brushing aside the heavy branches. Beneath the shattered limbs, a shape emerged. Not an animal, but a person. A young woman lay half buried in snow, her winter uniform torn and stained with blood. Her auburn hair, damp and tangled, clung to her cheeks. She wore the green jacket of a Montana wildlife ranger, its badge dulled by frost. Her skin was frighteningly pale, eyelashes crusted with ice, breath shallow as though clinging to the last threads of warmth. Aiden moved quickly, pushing away debris until he could assess the injuries. One leg was twisted unnaturally beneath her. The bone had clearly snapped. Her left shoulder was bruised deep purple beneath the torn fabric, and dried blood streaked across her temple where the tree's fall must have thrown her backward. She couldn't have been more than 30, though the exhaustion carved into her expression added years. He pressed 2 fingers to her neck. A pulse. Weak, thready, but still there. "Ma'am," he said gently. "Hey, can you hear me?" For a long moment nothing happened. Then her chest shuddered and her eyelids fluttered open. Her eyes, hazel with flecks of gold, blinked up at him in confusion, then sharpened with fear, then relief. "You're not one of them," she whispered. Her voice was rough and fragile, barely audible over the wind. "I'm Aiden," he said. "I'm here to help." She swallowed hard, wincing as pain rippled through her body. "Talia Rivers," she managed. "Wildlife, ranger. I was tracking—" Her words broke into a ragged cough. Aiden steadied her, trying not to cause further damage. "You're badly hurt," he said. "Don't move." Her eyes drifted toward the pups gathered at her side. They whined softly, pressing into her arm as though trying to warm her. Moisture glimmered in her lashes. Whether from the cold or relief, Aiden couldn't tell. "I followed a mother dog," she whispered. "German shepherd. She was injured, dragged into the woods by snares. I tried to get her out, but someone else was there. A man. He saw me. I ran. The tree." Her breath hitched as another wave of pain seized her. Aiden's jaw tightened. A mother dog. Injured. Dragged away. 4 pups. Abandoned in the storm. Everything aligned in a harsh, undeniable truth. "These puppies belong to her," he said quietly. Talia nodded weakly. "She fought for them. They cried. She kept pulling at her chain. She tried so hard." Her voice broke. Aiden felt something cold coil in his chest, not from the weather, but from the realization that whoever took the mother dog had been close, likely hunting through this very forest with illegal traps. If Talia had seen the man's face, she was in even greater danger. He scanned the tree line. The storm blurred everything into shifting white shadows, but the feeling of being watched crawled over him like static. He had no choice. The mission could wait. The puppies could wait. But Talia Rivers would die here if he didn't act. He stripped off his outer thermal liner, wrapping it firmly around her shoulders to restore some warmth. Her shivering eased slightly, though her breathing still came shallow and uneven. "I'm getting you out of here," Aiden said. "Don't fight it. Save your strength." She closed her eyes, barely nodding. Aiden pulled a length of cord from his pack and fashioned a quick sling to stabilize her broken leg. His movements were brisk but careful, each action driven by the unspoken urgency that hovered over the scene. Hypothermia, blood loss, shock, any one of them could end her night. When he finally lifted her into his arms, the pups followed instantly, circling his boots, yelping with agitation as though urging him to hurry. He took one step back toward higher ground, then paused. In the snow, just beyond the fallen pine, were footprints. Heavy, fresh. Not his, not Talia's. Someone had been here. Someone wearing boots with deep tread marks. Someone who moved in the same direction the pups had tried to lead him earlier. Aiden studied the pattern. The gait was heavy, unhurried, confident. A man familiar with the terrain, and not afraid of being followed. A chill deeper than the storm washed through him. Whoever it was might still be near. He lifted Talia higher against his chest, tightening his grip. The pups pressed close to his legs, trembling but determined. Time to move. The forest wind rose sharply as he began the trek away from the shattered pine, its voice curling between the branches like a warning. Somewhere deeper in the woods, a different sound drifted through the storm, a low metallic clink, like a trap being reset. Aiden didn't turn. He didn't need to. Someone was preparing for something, and he had just stepped into the middle of it. The storm showed no sign of mercy. Snow lashed the trees sideways, twisting through the branches like ghosts searching for warmth. The forest floor had disappeared under a soft, treacherous blanket that swallowed every step. Aiden stood in the blinding cold, breath fogging through his scarf as he adjusted the makeshift stretcher he'd fashioned from fallen branches, rope, and a thermal tarp torn from his pack. Talia lay on it, wrapped tightly in layers of insulating fabric. She was conscious, but only barely, her breaths shallow and uneven. The 4 pups circled anxiously at his feet, their tiny paws sinking deep into the drift. They whined every time the wind roared, as though terrified the world would swallow them again. Aiden knelt and patted their heads with his gloved hand. "Stay close," he murmured, and they seemed to understand, clustering near his boots. He tested the strength of the stretcher by lifting its front. The wood groaned but held. Pulling it alone across this frozen terrain would be exhausting, but there was no alternative. The nearest structure marked on Talia's map, a small ranger outpost long abandoned, lay nearly a mile through the storm. If he didn't reach shelter soon, her body temperature would fall to lethal levels. He secured the straps of his harness, leaned forward, and began to drag. The first pull felt like trying to move a fallen tree. Snow clung to the runners of the stretcher, adding weight with every inch. The wind cut across his face, slicing through the protective layers of his uniform. But Aiden pushed forward, boots crunching deep into the snow. One step, then another. The pups followed, sometimes sprinting ahead to break trail, sometimes falling behind and scrambling to catch up. Their determination mirrored his own, small bodies shivering but persistent. Behind him, Talia stirred weakly. Hey, she whispered. Aiden slowed, turning his head without stopping the pull. Her eyes were clouded with pain, half-lidded under frost-dusted lashes. "You're going to be all right," he said. "Just stay awake if you can." Talia blinked slowly, the hint of a smile touching her lips. "Trying." The wind eased for a moment, allowing her voice to rise just enough for him to hear. "That dog, the mother," she murmured. "She wasn't wild." Aiden kept pulling, but listened. "She had a training scar, right forepaw. Only service dogs get markers like that." Her breath hitched, and she swallowed. 3 years ago, a K9 unit disappeared in this region. A search and rescue German shepherd named Mira. Worked with Ranger Division. Smartest dog I ever met." She coughed, clutching the fabric wrapped around her shoulder. "I think Mira tried to save her litter. That's why I followed the trail." Aiden absorbed the words quietly. A trained dog, once a guardian, now captured or injured. The idea tightened something in his chest. The 4 pups, now bounding over his boots, seemed heavier with meaning. They weren't merely abandoned. They were the children of a working dog who had already given everything for service. "You saw someone take her?" he asked. Talia closed her eyes briefly, remembering. A man, tall, rough coat, metal traps in his pack. He saw me, and the mother pulled against her chain so hard the snow under her gave way. She tried to get me away. Tears mixed with the snow on her cheeks. I ran. Then the tree fell. Aiden's grip on the harness tightened. The forest felt sharper now, each shadow a threat. He looked down at the pups, who stuck to his feet like 4 small guardians. "We'll find her," he said quietly. Talia exhaled, whether from relief or despair he couldn't tell. The storm thickened again, howling through the ravine. Aiden leaned harder into the stretcher, muscles burning as he dragged it upward along a slope. Snow rose to his knees. Every few steps he had to pause, letting his breath steady before pushing onward. The pups, despite the cold, refused to leave his side. The wind carried faint cracking sounds, tree branches groaning under the weight of ice, but something else as well. A rhythm, a pattern, like footsteps muffled under layers of snow. Aiden stopped and listened, the forest stilled for a heartbeat. Nothing, only the distant roar of the wind, and yet his instincts didn't lie. Years of training had shaped him into someone who recognized subtle shifts. Someone was behind them, not close but following, and heavy enough to leave impressions in the drifts. He pulled again, harder, aware they were now racing against more than nature. The path narrowed between dense pines. Talia winced with each jolt. Aiden adjusted his route to smoother terrain, though the storm offered few mercies. Frost crusted in his eyebrows and lashes, and his breath came in sharp clouds. Still he moved, dragging the stretcher through the endless white. As he crested a short ridge, something glinted through the trees. The faint silhouette of a cabin roof, half collapsed, snow-packed, weary with age. Relief flickered through him. Shelter, a place to warm her, treat her, and buy time. The pups barked, tails raising slightly as if sensing hope. Aiden pushed forward with renewed force. Far behind them, Jonas Hale paused beside the fallen pine. Snow clung to his thick beard and eyebrows, and his breath steamed through the gap in his crooked teeth. He wore a heavy canvas coat patched with mismatched hides, and on his belt hung a jagged skinning knife. His eyes, small, pale, calculating, studied the ground with practiced ease. 2 sets of tracks, 1 sliding trail, paw prints. He crouched, running thick fingers across the surface of the snow. The marks were deep, spaced widely. Evidence of someone dragging significant weight. Someone strong, someone trained. Not a tourist, not a weekend hiker. A soldier, perhaps. A dangerous complication. Jonas straightened, slowly, an unpleasant smile creeping across his scarred face. "So you're not just any rescuer," he muttered. "Doesn't matter." He reached into his pack and pulled out a steel snare, the type meant to hold large predators, and set it carefully along the narrow forest trail. Then another, and another. He moved with practiced efficiency, arranging the traps into a web of silent danger designed to catch anything, or anyone, heading toward the old ranger cabin. He chuckled low, breath curling into the storm. "Let's see how far you get." Aiden pushed the stretcher down the final slope, the pups pressing ahead of him, barking with excitement as the broken cabin came into full view. Snow whipped against the battered walls, but it still stood. Barely. And that was enough. He didn't feel the shadow moving through the trees behind him. Not yet. But the forest did. It held its breath, waiting. The cabin stood crooked beneath the weight of winter, its roof sagging under layers of ice and its door swollen from years of storms. Aiden pushed it open with his shoulder, snow crashing from the lintel as the hinges groaned. Inside, darkness swallowed the single room. Dust, old timber, and cold air trapped in a forgotten space. Yet it was shelter, and shelter meant survival. He lowered the stretcher gently, kneeling beside Talia as her breath fogged in weak, uneven puffs. Her lips were pale, and her hair, matted with snow, clung to her cheek. The 4 pups rushed in around her, shivering, circling her as though trying to warm her with their small bodies. They curled into the curve of her side, whimpering softly each time she stirred. Aiden set to work immediately. He stripped off his gloves, igniting a fire in the stone hearth with a magnesium rod and the driest wood he could salvage from the corner. Sparks caught, then crawled into a flame that flickered gold across the cabin walls. Heat crept slowly through the room. He unwrapped Talia's layers, used thermal compresses from his kit, and stabilized her injured leg with splints torn from a broken table. Her eyelids fluttered open. The firelight danced across her tired brown eyes. "You did all this?" she whispered. "Had to," Aiden replied, checking her pulse. "You're still in the fight." A faint smile touched her lips. "Feels like it." The fire grew brighter, warming the icy air. The pups curled closer around her torso, their small chests rising and falling. One nuzzled her elbow, another rested its head near her heart. Talia gently stroked their backs despite the tremor in her hands. "They know me," she murmured. "Maybe they remember the scent from when I was tracking their mother." Aiden leaned back against the wall, exhaustion sinking into his muscles. The snow hammered at the windows, wind howling like something ancient. The cabin felt suspended between darkness and the fragile fire at its center. He hesitated, then spoke, voice low. "I lost men on a mission 2 years ago. Good men. Brothers." Talia looked toward him, her eyes softening. "We were ambushed in Himachal. Bad intel. One moment we were moving through the valley, the next—" He paused, jaw tightening. "Only 2 of us made it out. I was one of them. I've been trying to find meaning since." Silence wrapped around them, gentle and heavy. Talia's voice trembled as she responded. "I lost a K9 partner once." She swallowed hard. "Her name was Nara. Smart, loyal. She saved 3 hikers once. Then one night, a poacher's trap caught her. I found her too late." Her eyes glistened. Aiden watched her with quiet understanding. Their stories braided by pain neither had expected to share tonight. Before either could speak again, a sharp, metallic snap shattered the moment. Aiden jerked upright. The pups scrambled, whining. Talia tensed despite her injury. "That sounded like a trap," she whispered. Aiden grabbed his rifle, eased open the cabin door, and stepped into the roaring blizzard. Snow whipped across his face. The forest was a blur of white and shadow, but there, only a few yards away, a steel jaw trap clamped shut, triggered by the falling snow. He scanned the ground. More shapes glinted in the darkness. 6, maybe 7 traps, scattered in a semicircle, a deliberate perimeter. His breath tightened. Jonas had been here. Aiden crouched beside one trap, inspecting the mechanism. Heavy-gauge steel, reinforced hinge, designed for large predators or men. He stood quickly, instincts flaring. A crunch echoed behind him, soft but certain. He spun, raising his rifle. Jonas Hale emerged from behind a clump of pines, a bulky silhouette against the swirling white. His heavy coat was patched with old leather, and the jagged scar down his cheek looked deeper in the cold. In his right hand glinted a hunting knife nearly as long as Aiden's forearm. "Well now," Jonas rasped, voice scraping the wind. Didn't expect company up here? Aiden didn't lower the rifle. You've got one chance to walk away. Jonas grinned, revealing uneven, yellowed teeth. Walk away? I've been working this ridge for years. You think some soldier's gonna scare me off? The storm howled louder, flinging snow between them like sparks. Without warning, Jonas lunged. Aiden sidestepped, sweeping his boot across the snow to unbalance him. Jonas stumbled but swung his knife upward, catching a thread of Aiden's jacket. The fabric tore. Aiden dropped low, swept an arm forward, and drove his shoulder into Jonas's ribs. The impact sent Jonas backward into the snow. He rose again with frightening speed, eyes wild. Should have kept out of this, boy, Jonas slashed. Aiden dodged, the blade slicing air just inches from his throat. They circled each other in the storm, breath steaming, snow swirling like shrapnel. Jonas struck again. Aiden caught his wrist, twisted sharply, and the knife clattered to the ground. Jonas roared, swinging with his other hand. Aiden ducked and drove a fist into his stomach. Jonas collapsed to his knees, gasping. For a moment, the forest was still except for the wind. Aiden grabbed Jonas by the collar. "Where is the mother dog?" he demanded. Jonas spat blood into the snow. "Alive, for now. Worth more that way." Aiden's grip tightened. "Where?" Jonas's grin twisted, ugly and hateful. "Find her yourself." A burst of wind knocked snow loose from the branches. Jonas seized the moment, ramming his shoulder into Aiden's leg. Aiden staggered. Jonas scrambled to his feet, snatched his knife, and fled into the blizzard, vanishing between the trees. Aiden aimed, but the storm dissolved his silhouette into nothing. He lowered the rifle slowly, breathing hard. The traps glinted around him, silent threats lining the forest floor. He now knew the truth. The mother was alive. Jonas was desperate. And the storm was far from over. He turned back toward the cabin. Talia and the pups needed him, and the real hunt had only just begun. The morning sky over Silver Crest glowed in muted gold as the blizzard softened into a drifting hush. Snow clung to every branch, turning the forest into a cathedral of white silence. Aiden stood beside the landing pad outside Snowline Regional Hospital, watching as medics rushed Talia inside. Her eyes fluttered briefly before she disappeared behind the swinging doors, the 4 pups huddled anxiously in the blanket he had wrapped them in. He stepped back, breath steaming through the crisp air. A military officer would have returned directly to base, written the report, and moved on. But the forest had imprinted something on him. 4 trembling pups searching for their mother. A wounded ranger braving storms to protect a creature she believed in, and a ruthless poacher turning the wilderness into a battlefield. He wasn't finished here. When Ranger Division Captain Eliza Monroe arrived, her presence was impossible to miss. She was in her mid-40s, sharp-featured and stern, with dark eyes that carried years of tracking criminals through brutal terrain. Her posture was straight as a blade, and her uniform was pressed with the rigid precision of someone who trusted order above sentiment. "You're Aiden Rourke?" she asked, voice low and steady. "That's right." "Talia's stable thanks to you," she said. "But we have another matter. Those pups, did they come from the mother Talia mentioned?" Aiden nodded. "Jonas has her, or had her. She's alive." The pups whimpered, as if agreeing. Captain Monroe studied the animals, then turned toward the forest. "We follow their lead. They'll know the way." The mission formed without ceremony. 4 rangers joined them, each equipped with winter search gear, rifles, and radios. Among them was Deputy Rylan Ward, a tall, good-natured man with sandy blonde hair and an easy smile that vanished instantly when the topic turned to poachers. He nodded respectfully at Aiden, recognizing the authority earned by survival. The pups walked ahead, their steps tiny but determined. They sniffed the snow, looked back at Aiden for reassurance, then pressed onward. The team followed through narrow, icy passages where the wind whispered warnings between the pines. Hours passed before the forest widened into a ravine. The pups barked, tails stiff, and ran toward a rock formation crusted with frost. Aiden knelt beside them and pressed his hand against the stone. A cold breath of air seeped from beneath it, a cave. He drew his flashlight and stepped inside first. The cave's darkness dissolved under the beam, revealing a shape curled near the back wall. A German shepherd, larger than the pups but gaunt from hunger, her fur matted with ice. One of her legs was trapped in a steel jaw snare. Her eyes snapped open at the sound of footsteps, filled not with aggression but with exhausted fear. "Mira," Aiden breathed. She let out a low, trembling whine. He approached slowly, kneeling so she could see his hands. "It's okay. Your babies are here." The pups rushed forward, crying with relief. Mira lifted her head, nudging them weakly as they pressed around her in desperate reunion. Aiden inspected the trap. The metal bit deep into her leg, but there was no bone fracture. He stabilized her body, braced his feet, and forced the jaws open with a grunt. Mira whimpered, but the moment her leg was free, she curled protectively around her young. Captain Monroe stepped forward. "Let's get her out." Aiden wrapped his jacket around Mira, then lifted her carefully into his arms. She was heavier than she looked, muscle hidden beneath weeks of suffering. The pups followed closely, one of them nibbling at Aiden's bootlace as though thanking him. As they exited the cave, the wind carried a faint sound, boots crunching over distant snow. Captain Monroe signaled silently. The team moved into tactical formation. The trail Jonas left behind was clumsy, angry, broken branches, drag marks, a spent fire pit. The kind of path made by a man who believed he was alone. It led them to a clearing where a makeshift poaching camp sprawled between towering spruces. Metal cages, snares, crates labeled with illegal codes, and a small generator that sputtered in protest of the cold. Jonas Hale froze mid-step as he spotted the rangers closing in from every angle. His face twisted. "You." His eyes locked on Aiden, rage boiled through him. "You cost me everything." He reached for the rifle slung over his shoulder. "Don't," Captain Monroe warned. Jonas fired anyway. The shot cracked across the clearing. Snow burst into the air inches from Aiden's side. Mira barked sharply from his arms. The pups hid behind his boots. The rangers returned fire, precise and controlled. Jonas tried to flee into the trees, but Deputy Ward tackled him hard, pinning him face first into the snow. Within seconds, the cuffs clicked closed. Aiden stepped forward, breath steady. Jonas glared up at him, teeth clenched with hatred. "You don't know what this forest owes me," Jonas spat. Aiden's voice was quiet. "No forest owes cruelty anything." The trial concluded weeks later in federal court. 15 years in prison for poaching, animal cruelty, illegal weapon possession, attacking a law enforcement officer, and causing severe injury within a protected conservation zone. Justice carried weight, and this time, it landed where it belonged. Spring sunlight filtered through the tall windows of Snowline Hospital as Talia Rivers took her first steps without crutches. Her auburn hair was shorter now, framing her face with renewed strength. She paused at the entrance where Aiden waited, Mira lying beside him with her bandaged leg healed enough to carry weight. "You kept your promise," Talia said, smiling warmly. "Had good teammates," he replied, nodding at Mira, who barked once as if seconding the thought. Outside, the pups, 5 months old now, bounded across a snowy field, melting into early spring grass. Strong, golden-coated, full of life. Captain Monroe had promoted Talia to lead a new winter wildlife rescue unit, and Aiden, after filing for leave from active service, joined her, trading battlefields for forests that desperately needed guardians. One quiet evening, as the sun dipped low and cast silver light across the thawing snow, Aiden and Talia stood together by the ridge overlooking Silver Crest. Mira sat between them. The pups tumbled in the distance, chasing each other through the soft, golden haze of the season's final winter sunset. Talia looked at Aiden, her voice soft. Hard to believe this all started with a sound in a storm. Aiden smiled gently. Some storms don't break you. They lead you somewhere worth staying. The forest breathed around them, alive, whole, protected, and for the first time in a long time, everything felt exactly right. In the quiet hush after the storm, Aiden, Talia, and the dogs found more than survival. They found grace. And perhaps that is the message waiting for all of us. That sometimes the Lord's miracles arrive softly, wrapped in small paws, quiet courage, and the kindness of strangers who refuse to walk away. Life doesn't always give us clear skies. We all weather blizzards of fear, doubt, loneliness, or loss. Yet even in the darkest cold, the Lord, in His mercy, sends gentle signs to guide us home. A helping hand, a loyal companion, a spark of hope we didn't know we needed. If this story touched your heart, I invite you to share it with someone who might need a reminder that they are not walking through life alone. Leave a comment below about a moment when you felt protected, guided, or lifted by a quiet miracle in your own life. And if you'd like to hear more stories of courage, faith, and bonds that change lives, please remember to subscribe to the channel and join our growing family. May the Lord bless you, keep you safe, and place His loving hand upon everyone you hold dear. And may He continue sending little miracles, just like these faithful dogs, to light your path through every storm. Amen.